You're listening to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast, where we discuss whatever the fuck we want to. And yes, we can put sex and drugs and Jesus all in the same bed and still be all right at the end of the day. My name is Devannon, and I'll be interviewing guests from every corner of this world as we dig into topics that are too risque for the morning show, as we strive to help you understand what's really going on in your life. There is nothing off the table, and we've got a lot to talk about, so let's dive right into this episode. Hello, beautiful kids out there, and welcome back to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. I'm your host, Devannon, and today I have with me a beautiful man, beautiful in his mind, beautiful in his heart, beautiful in his soul, beautiful in his spirit, pretty much in every way a man can be beautiful. This man has it going on, and he is the host of the Hear Some Evil podcast. You heard me right. The Hear Some Evil podcast. His name is Emerson Souza. And this show here is going to be more of like a free flow conversation. He and I are going to be just chopping it up and talking about some pretty deep shit. You know, we can talk about how he made it through the murder of a very close friend of his and all of the drama and bullshit around that nonsense. We're going to talk about the roots of self-righteousness. People be hating on tattoos, man, tattoos, but why though? Abusive family, chosen family, our thoughts on adoption, and everything from the Big Bang Theory, the Big Bang Theory to God. Fuck is a theory? I just made it a word, so be it then. Enjoy the show, and again, this is Emerson Souza from the Hear Some Evil podcast. Hello, all my beautiful souls out there, and welcome back to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus. Yes, that's a sweet baby Jeebus, Jebsus podcast. My name is Devannon. I'm your hostess with the mostest, and I have this deliciously handsome man here, Emerson Souza, with me today from the Hear Some Evil podcast. Yes, Hear Some Evil podcast. Sometimes it's good to hear about the evil things in this world. Emerson, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Devanna. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Oh, fuck yeah. And so, I was on Emerson's show, and you'll find the episodes over, on Apple, wherever you get your podcast. And so now he has come on my show. If you want to catch that interview, it is out there for you. So tell us about Here's Some Evil. Where did you come up with the name of that podcast, and why did you start it? Why Here's Some Evil?
Sure. All right. So I've always been, I would say the origin story really starts with people. So I've always been interested in people in general. I studied psychology. I, um, so not only have I been interested in just people in general, but also their psyche. And so as I met people over the years, I started kind of learning about diversity of thought. And and you start, and then as you get older, you learn things more politically, within the political spectrum. And and I became obsessed with conversation, and I just love having conversations with people. And so I thought it would be a fun idea to start a podcast and just have conversations and of really about anything. And then as I was trying to figure out a name for the podcast, even before I even really had an idea of the format, I was like, what do I want to talk about? What are the type of people that I want to talk to or talk with? And and then I started having these like kind of ad hoc conversations with people as I started traveling. And and what was fascinating is that, like, I don't know, people are so different and people are open, but there's a lot of people out there that aren't really willing to have a discussion about a variety of topics. They're not really willing to be open or to have some sort of discord or discourse on just whatever the climate is on whatever out there. So I honestly, it kind of bothered me. There were certain things that I was trying to talk about or bring up to people on opposite ends of the political spectrum, and and it just seemed like just there was this massive barrier, and people were just more willing to stick with their kind, and whatever ideology that they were a part of, without even listening, without just they don't have to agree. The idea is not agreeing. The idea is just listening to what's out there. And I remember back when I was in like high school and then going into college, I grew up in a very, very conservative household. My mom's side, they were all Christian Baptists, Catholics on my dad's side. And I was very much the black sheep. I'm the only one in my family who has tattoos. There might be like one other cousin that has a tattoo, but actually, yeah, I think I do. I have one other cousin that has a tattoo, but only one with tattoos. The only one that partied, enjoyed drinking, drugs. But at the end of the day, like, I had chaos and degenerates, uh, uh, and being as degenerate deeply inside of me. But I was also, I'm educated. I, went to college, got my master's, all these things. So that wasn't all of everything about me, but it was really hard for my family to understand who I was as a person. And my grandmother actually stopped talking to me for like 2 years when I first started getting tattoos. And and whenever I tried to have a conversation with her about, hey, like just listen to who I am as a person, and 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 not like don't look at me just as from the exterior or any other topic, about like me having gay friends or me having friends that are also into tattoos, whatever. But she would just call everything evil. Everything in her eyes were evil, evil, evil. Like, no, like I don't want to listen to this evil. And I remember being like a long time ago, just being like, listen to the evil. Just listen to what you deem as evil, and let's just have a conversation about it. Let me explain to you why I like getting tattoos. That has nothing to do. Obviously, I'm not affiliated with any gangs or anything like that. It's as I'm trying to explain to her, it's like there's passion around the process. There's passion around the consultation, and there's actually I'm not a masochist at all. Like I'm not in it for the pain, but I'm in it for there's actually like something that's therapeutic about sitting there for hours on end, and two people are getting to know each other in this very intimate process. There's nothing like it. Like you can't have that conversation with a doctor mid surgery. You can't have a conversation with your dentist, mid whitening or whatever. But there's no other process that I can think of that is like it. So as I'm trying to explain this to her, it just completely, it was just evil. So it's just like one of those things, like just hear my evil, and so it just applied to everything in my life. Having conversations with other people that weren't open, and so by the time the podcast commenced, I was like, I think I have an idea. I think this is it.
All of that sounds great and cute and lovely, and I commend you on the strides you've taken. But we need to acknowledge what this show is really about. Who is that pretty white cat who just stepped
Well, I'm
into the
how I
frame?
know I'm house sitting. It's a very vocal cat. If you could hear it. But,
Their
oh, there it
name
is.
looks like a
Yeah,
little cat angel spirit thing.
yeah, coconut.
Oh yeah. Hey Coconut. Hey Coco baby. Hey Coco kitty.
Hey, come back, come back. Yeah, come on, yeah. Dude, it's a cat. They when they wanna be pet, they'll stick around, and then when you wanna pet them, they're not gonna come up. Come on, come
So
on.
so Christian Baptist and Catholic, what a fucking shit show of a mix that is.
Yeah, no, I know.
So what I'm hearing like your granny say is the complete opposite of what the Holy Ghost was showing me in my dreams when I was a child, as God was prepping me to one day become a soul winner. But
Mhm,
he showed me in this dream that in order to win a soul in the Christian Bible, I do not consider myself a Christian. I'm just referring to it so people know what the fuck I'm talking about.
yeah.
The Christian Bible from over there in the Middle East, tells us that he who wins souls is wise. So you cannot be a fool. You cannot, you have to be clear minded, and you have to be able to circumnavigate around the wiles and tricks of the devil in order to be able to put enough knowledge inside somebody to where God can use that to convert them. And what the spirit was showing me in this dream is that in order to do that, the first thing I have to do is not what the Jehovah's Witnesses do, not what your granny did, but God told me to find a common ground with people and to get on the same page with them. And then, spiritual conversation, soul conversation can come naturally from that after we establish like a friendship or some sort of bond that has nothing to do with spirituality,
Wow.
not necessarily.
Mhm.
So God told me to respect people and to respect whatever it is that they're doing and not to judge it. So then the question I pose to you, and you can comment on what I just said, what is it within the church and where does it come from? The self righteousness, and why do people make such a big deal of calling everything evil?
I think that's a fantastic question. So why I don't think there's one definitive answer. I think that I think historically, because people have found so much pride in whatever ideology that they follow, that to the point where, up until very recently, or honestly, it probably still very much goes around nowadays where but a majority of the wars that were had over the course of decades, centuries, to even thousands of years, uh, were based on some sort of religious background. And I think that, like, that's where the self-righteousness comes, that someone is willing to kill for their own, religion. I mean, if you think about it, like, the attempts to exterminate Jewish people all the way to Romans, right? There's always been some sort of conflict in a variety, like, even and then, oh man, like, when it comes to what's going on in the Middle East at the same time, uh it's I think it's just deeply rooted in this idea that their God is the one God, or the idea that anything outside of what they believe in is just the complete wrong answer, for lack of a better way to say it. And I don't know, I think, people make a lot of people make religion their entire, character. So, if I'm answering the question, I think that that's essentially where it's almost like it's like kind of like encoded in our DNA for someone who is deeply religious to an extent, and, it takes certain people like me and like yourself to break that mold, because we're almost like genetically predisposed to believe in some sort of spirituality. Even like even I think atheists are still like very much following an ideology. They're just not, calling it a god, or they're not calling it, really anything. But they're still out there, and they still preach like as if they did believe in a god. And I mean, even people like, so even atheists, I think there's a self righteousness with atheism. They kind of talk to religious people rather condescendingly, and kind of saying, "How dare you believe in a god, or, or any prophets? It sounds stupid. It sounds, whatever." And I think that even that, for me personally, like, I don't consider myself religious. I'm agnostic at best. I don't consider myself an atheist, because I think even atheism wi- is an interesting concept to say that, that nothing exists is one thing. I think that's kind of self-righteous as well. Um, anyways, a lot of these are just most of his word vomit. But yeah, I think that's kind of where it comes from, to an extent. To an extent.
Correct. Like you said, there's perhaps no one answer, but I tie everything back to Lucifer. I believe that Satan is real. I've had enough of demonic experiences from people doing witchcraft on me to wrestling with the devil in the middle of the night. And not to mention the things I've seen in my seen. If I was Satan, if I was Satan, and I wanted to fool a bunch of people into joining me in everlasting torment and separation from God, I would go about the business of playing on their pride, hubris, and ego. Anything that is an emotional spike
Mm,
is the easiest way to trick people, because when people's emotions run high, their defenses are down. In hypnotherapy, the field that I studied and I'm licensed in, we call that a state of hypersuggestibility. And it's no different when you go to the movies and all of those things are going on, and you believe that movie is real because you're so excited that your mind accepts it.
sure.
So if I'm Satan and I don't really like you, I'm not going to attack you directly. I'm going to make you and play on your pride and make you look down on other people because you feel good while you do it. And a lot of people cannot separate feeling good from the fact that what they're doing is actually not good. Most people are so superficial, or a lot of people are, that they just go along with whatever feels good.
Yeah.
So that's why you have this preacher who's already probably a narcissist, because most of them are, you know, with an inflated ego. I've been to seminary and I've been in enough churches to be able to vouch for that fucking claim. You're trying to get one of them to give a meaningful apology, bitch. What? You'll be waiting till the next lifetime. And so they take that same spirit of evil and they very slyly and subtly put it into the congregation. In the Church of God in Christ, they used to tell us not to give rides to people who were evil or heretics, because somehow it was going to cut us out of our blessings. Things like that don't do nothing but make the congregation say, okay, well, I'm better than that person. I'm not going to let them in my car. But that's not what Jesus would have said.
Sure.
And then jumping to conclusions about tattoos, the Church of God in Christ said no tattoos, no piercings, no this, no that. I'm like, that ain't nowhere in nobody's Bible. On my TikTok channel earlier today, I was looking, I had did a preview show talking about like the way Satan tempts people and things like that. Kind of like what we're talking about now, and somebody on there, and I thought it was so comical. This is how I know I've arrived. I've made it. And he was like, nobody with a pink beard has a right to be talking about temptation. They're like, first of all, it's a rainbow, bitch, not just pink. And then, and then secondly, that's the way people with fallen minds think. They jump to conclusions. Oh, he wears all black, must worship Satan. He's not straight, must want to fuck little boys in the ass. They don't question where they get this from. Tattoos are evil. No matter what it is, they're just all evil. You know, that's not conscious living. That's reactionary, emotional living that
Yeah.
is all spun up in the cloak of religious justification. And Satan has all of those people right in the palm of his hands and making them feel good while they're sitting there boiling slowly to death.
Yeah. When I started questioning religion, it didn't have anything to do with the scripture. It didn't have anything to do with what the words were being perpetuated within the text. I was questioning people's interpretation because I was a relatively inquisitive child. And when I would hear certain things, right, when they were anti this, anti that, anti whatever it may be, I was just simply asking questions. I just wanted to know why they thought that, and how did they come to this conclusion. And I was only met was well first reprimanded for even asking, which was my very first kind of like it was my strike one against religion personally, where the fact that you're reprimanding a child for just asking questions, like, we should be celebrating the fact that it doesn't matter what the question is, celebrating that a child is curious enough to even like, question something to that level. And so I was reprimanded at first, and then secondly, I was basically given the answer that uh, it's just evil. It's simply just evil. And so I actually started learning more and more about Christianity at the time, and I really wanted to know what exactly is the Bible saying in regards to some of these things that they have accused as being evil. And you brought up a good point. At the end of the day, it really doesn't say that much about certain things like that. For example, like tattoos. And and even then, when you bring it up, like I said, it's because of it all comes down to interpretation. Their interpretation is groupthink. There's no there is no discord in the interpretations of the Bible when it comes to certain people. And and I had a huge issue with that. I have been interested in science, for example, and there's this whole thing about the Earth being 6,000 years old that I had a hard time believing, right? So I questioned it. I said, why do you think that? And let me show you what I've learned in school. And it was just once again being reprimanded, right? So yeah, it was hard for me. And mind you, the being reprimanded is not like go to your room. This is like corporal punishment type shit that I'm talking about. And so like I'm like, getting hit with a switch for questioning. I'm getting hit with a belt or a sandal or getting slapped in the mouth for, I got slapped in the mouth in front of a bunch of people in church. And it's like, you know, uh, you hear about this like non-judgmental religion. That's like one of the things that they preach, this whole love thy neighbor kind of concept. One of the commandments is it's engraved in stone metaphorically, but here I am getting hit for simply questioning something, right? So, yeah.
Somebody should have slapped those bitches back.
Yeah, man.
That-
I would
That's that's
I
some
I w I will say that, it's culturally too. So to give a little bit more, give the people a background. So my family's from Brazil, and not just from Brazil. They are from a state called Minas Gerais, which is considered like the Alabama or Louisiana or Texas of Brazil. Like it's the southern most relatively most conservative part of Brazil. It's not geographically, it's because it's where all the majority of the farmland is. So my entire family are my aunts and uncles are uneducated. They've never lived for the most part outside of their little hometown. They're only up until the internet. So really like up until they were 30, 40, 50 years old, some of them, they only knew what that little small town knew. And and questioning outside of anything outside of that was was constantly admonished. So it goes deeper than just the religion, right? It goes because it goes into culture, it goes into geography, and then honestly, just like my mom's side of the family has been in the same vicinity, like the hometown for nearly probably 300 years. Like it's something crazy like that.
what I want to ask you about whether or not they have like witchcraft and things like that down there in a second.
Sure.
That you said it's like Louisiana, and I think you're being like geopolitically, but I'm always curious about these sort of like works in other parts of the world.
Yeah.
And mentioning like the age of the earth, I personally, my humble opinion is that the Big Bang Theory and the Genesis story don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Hmm.
Because when Genesis opens, the earth is already here, which gives space to me for the dinosaurs and cavemen and all of those things. God did not create the earth in Genesis. It was already here and the waters are already here. And so I don't see why God couldn't have spoke and it could have been the Big Bang and then all this stuff could have been put into motion. I think that we really can have it both ways in this particular case. That's just my opinion on it.
Hmm.
The witchcraft though, does your family practice this? Are they aware of it? Because the South is just like you're saying, when you have small minded country as people, they're quite easy to manipulate.
Yeah.
Okay. But these people practice those dark arts around here, and I know they do in other countries. Do they do that down there?
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. There in Brazil we have our version of like voodoo, right? But that's not in my parents' home state for the most part. That's kind of like a northern like I would say that's more yeah, the northeastern part of Brazil is more where like witchcraft and voodoo is kind of being practiced. But no, I mean if anything, my family and the people around my family are they don't look too kindly to whatever witchcraft or voodoo, is happening. Yeah, if anything, they kinda call that Satanism by themselves. Yeah.
Beelzebub. So I'm going to go over your show titles in a little bit just so people can kind of hear what they say, and we'll talk about this break you've taken from the show and when it's going to resume. But
Okay.
first, what is it that you currently believe spiritually?
So, yeah, I mean, honestly, I like, legitimately don't know. I don't know if I believe in anything in a God. So that personally, like, I think that, like, spirituality for me feels like it's just whatever the universe is. But the universe is so vague and it's so perfect. In order for the universe to work, and I'm when it comes to the universe and physics, it's still, even though physics, like, you can explain certain things with physics, it's still interesting the level of coincidence in order for life to happen. I Just like if you think about Earth, if Earth was whatever 10, 50 degrees closer to the sun, everybody would be dead. If the Earth was 50 degrees further away from the sun, everybody would be dead. It just, or would, I don't know, it just, or would we be different types of humans? I don't know. But it just seems like in order for things to work out in the universe to an extent, I even go back to the fact that, when dinosaurs were extinct, uh, it seems just too perfect and too perfect for us humans. Like, our survival kind of happened because these dinosaurs don't exist anymore. It's like, kind of, you know what I mean? It's all of these coincidences coincidences that happen in order for us to be better, whatever, better beings. So I don't know. I feel like there could be something, an entity, but I have a hard time calling it God because I don't understand, like, I just don't understand what God means. Like, because when I think of God, it's like a person, right? And I have a hard time believing that it's like that. It's something so similar to us. But if we're like the whole, like, we're in his image kind of thing, that's the part that's like, we're so deeply flawed. And I can't imagine if there was something that was similar to us with that great of power, they would have been fucking up 10 times over. So yeah, man, I struggle with this question all the time because, I try to tell people I'm just agnostic, and I simply do not know. I'm open to learning about everything. I do have a hard time when it comes to religion, because it seems too, like, it's honed in on one too it's just too specific for me. But yeah, man, that's the best answer that I could give you, to be honest. Uh, It's always gonna seem vague and maybe even somewhat arbitrary, but I I can believe in spirituality. I certainly can. I know that I can. Just simply looking at the universe by itself. But anything outside of that, I have a harder time believing in.
Well, as I've heard it said before, you are where you are, and that's okay. And we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, sure. Mhm.
So, but I wish you clarity and the refinement of your beliefs in the future when the time is right.
Yeah, no, of course. No, I it's funny because, like, I would like to look more into it. I do think about this all the time, but to have that clarity that you were talking about, or a better understanding, or a definitive answer, something where next time I'm asked that question, I'm like, "Oh, I'll tell you exactly what I believe in." But, I grew up in such a concrete way, and and then I was pushed to the complete opposite side where I believed in nothing. I didn't believe in a god or spirituality or ghosts or witches or whatever. Didn't None of that stuff. And then, the universe is the thing that really, like, captured me the most. Uh, And, all starts off with Earth, and the ability for things to survive on Earth for, I mean, millions of years without too much interruption. There's always interruption. But I also attribute that to a coincidence. So it just seems like it can't all be coincidences. One of my favorite lines in my favorite movie is in V for Vendetta, is that there are no coincidences, just the illusion of coincidences.
Come on, Guy Fox. Yeah, I love that movie. I used to binge watch that son of a bitch. I love me a good rebellion. Viva la resistance.
Viva la resistance. Yeah. So I love that quote so much because it seems like it's the purpose, or the perfect embodiment of what spirituality could be. Not just spirituality, but it's a good representation of it because the earth, like I said, the universe is perfect. Like things are happening and things are surviving within the universe in this cyclical kind of format. And evidence kind of shows that it happens, like it does repeat itself, and life finds a way, a Jurassic Park quote. But so it seems like it's all coincidental, but or it's just the illusion of a coincidence. So
Mm.
yeah.
The truth will unfold in time. So, y'all, again, this is the Here's Some Evil podcast. I'm just going to read some of these show titles and he's going to explain to you why he's taking a break and he's going to be starting again, releasing episodes in a few weeks. So, just some that caught my eyes were geriatric drug use, a boca bitches, people of Florida, ew.
Oh yeah.
What an unfortunate mess they have on their hand. Does celery, does, does celery boost testosterone and racist worms? So your last show was in March. You had to take a break. What happened?
Sure. So I well, it really starts. It goes back kind of even further than that. So I talked about this on on one of my shows. I interviewed a ketamine therapist relatively recently, and I think that show is actually titled Ketamine Therapy, or Ketamine Assistant Therapy, something like that. But I I had a very drastic change in my life about 2 years ago. So I lived my life relatively kind of like without. Sorry, I would say my adulthood. I lived my adulthood relatively worry free. When I say I lived throughout my 20s, like, I feel like I really, really lived. I I did just enough to I was a perfect B plus, A minus student. I never did more than I needed to, and I never did less than I needed to. And so life for me kinda just was really, really easy. I was good at tests. College was kind of easy. Then I went to grad school. Grad school was hard-ish, but man, I was still living. Like, I was still out partying, meeting a ton of friends. I was enjoying life, and I never really had any type of anxieties. I mean, honestly, like, really ever. And then and then I started so then I start I then I was in a long-term relationship with somebody, and towards the end of our relationship, I wasn't in this, like, crazy, like, toxic relationship or anything like that. I had simply fallen in love with somebody that I don't think that we were truly compatible, and I think that I was forcing it, and and then all of a sudden, it just felt like, you realize how old you are, and I know it's arbitrary, but, like, it's also very cultural, right? You get to 30 and then, like, you can hear your mom or your grandmother's voice in the background, like, "Why aren't you married, and why don't you have kids?" and blah, blah, blah. And and then work, I really hated work so, so much. And then I had also recently discovered this new passion where I started doing stand-up comedy. And and now I'm toiling with with this where I'm like, my job is really sucking at the moment, and I have this new passion, which is not just it's not the stand-up comedy part, it's like the writing and the producing jokes, and I love to tell stories if it's not obvious. Everything that I've said is incredibly long-winded. But I so I was struggling with a lot of stuff mentally all at once, all at once. It was just everything just felt like it was came crashing down. And I never struggled with like life things really, really in my adulthood. My childhood was shitty. My parents were not great parents, alcoholic father, crazy religious mom. And but by the time but when I was like 18, I was like, fuck it, childhood is over. Like, time to experience and time to like now I'm in charge and I can do whatever I want. And I did whatever I wanted. And then for 12 years, I kind of just like I said, college, grad school, then work, and then everything was fucking awesome. I was traveling, I was meeting tons of friends, I was dating a ton, and it was great. It was fantastic. And then I hit this point where everything, it's like I was 31, I think, 30, no, 2 years ago, 33. So everything felt like it just came crashing down. And I lost it. I could mentally just completely lost it. And started having these violent anxiety attacks. And I ended up in the hospital several times. I was convinced that I had some sort of brain tumor. This was not part of my psyche for the most part. I never understood what the hell was going on because I never had anxiety in general. And then all of a sudden, I'm having these like crazy anxiety attacks where I'm convinced that I'm dying. So I uh, I went to the hospital several times. I'm like, there's got to be something in my brain. Like this isn't normal. And they're like trying to explain to me, that that's all it is. It's like your brain is reacting to something, right? And then all of a sudden, I manifested these, phobias where I've traveled thousands of times. I mean, I've been on a plane probably thousands of times. It must something like that, or in the high hundreds. And all of a sudden, I became afraid of flying. All of a sudden, I became claustrophobic. All of a sudden, I became agoraphobic. I became afraid to leave my own apartment. I was stuck in my apartment for almost 3 weeks without leaving at all. And so I went through this period in my life, right? So I ended up going to therapy, heavy therapy, really, really intense therapy. And I ended up getting out of that funk. And I can get it if you we can get into that if you want to ask me later how I got out of it. I'm happy to talk about it. But I eventually, like over time, I got out of it through a lot of therapy, you know. And then the breakup happened. It was devastating, but I needed to focus on myself. Like that, like as much as I love this person, it was really important that I focus on myself. And I wanted to pursue my passion, which was comedy, storytelling, all these things, and conversation. So I was like, I still, I had those phobias, and I felt too afraid to get on stage. So the podcast was the next best thing. So I started doing the podcast, and I fell in love with it. I was doing once every 2 weeks, something like that. And at first I started just doing it with friends. That's why you see all those, like, weird titles like Clam Jam and Racist Worms. So, because at first it was just really weird conversations with my friends, but then eventually I was like, "You know what? I love my friends. They're the greatest people in the world." But I was like, "But I also have a deep passion for meeting new people and learning about them." So then I started seeking other people out there. So I found you and some other authors, and I think at this point I've already interviewed 4 authors. A CEO, ketamine therapist, this actress, anyways, but several people. So everything was going good. My anxiety was getting better. I then moved to San Francisco, and I was confronted with another kind of like weird phobia that all kind of stayed in line. But I was like, you know what? I'm working on myself. So this is a good opportunity to try and work with myself. And then about a couple months ago. I was gonna take a break because I started writing again, and I was like, "All right, it's time for me to get on stage." I was prepping for that. I wanted to put a pause on the podcast, but and then a good friend of mine was murdered.
Hold up a second.
Yeah.
Before we get on the murder of the friend,
Mhm.
and I'm sorry that that happened, I, I want to know when you went to therapy for these phobias, what was determined was the cause of them coming up?
Sure. So, me living my kind of worry-free life, I ignored other things that were happening. So I started having some GI issues, and I kind of just did my own kind of I just Googled things and self-diagnosed myself with whatever. And yeah, basically my body became more and more sensitive to certain foods, and I, instead of avoiding them or trying to figure out a better, nutrition plan for myself, like I said, I ignored it. I didn't do anything about it, and then all of a sudden, like, the problem with my body, I guess, just exacerbated, yeah, and then it ended up to the point where I developed IBS, like some like a relative at the time, a relatively aggressive form of, like, IBS, and I still ignored it. I still did nothing about it. I was just, like, trying to go to Walgreens and buy a bunch of random pills and not take any medication, but it really fucked me up in the long term because I became overly conscious about where I was, like, I in the day, because I had this, like, constant fear of, you know, like, going to the like, having to go to the bathroom in an inopportune time. So it wasn't that didn't spike the anxiety. Well, what happened was the anxiety attacks came, and then it took that thing in addition to all the other trauma that I was having, and then though that thing that I was going that was happening to the whole GI thing, that manifested into claustrophobia. So, like, that's kind of the root cause. It's like a really weird thing. So basically, like if I was in an Uber, my brain would tell me that if you're trapped, you're gonna need to go to the bathroom right now. Hence the claustrophobia. That's kind of like how it all happened. So it was like this weird cycle where it was one thing that was happening, and then the anxiety attacks coming, and the anxiety, my brain, my psyche took that aspect of whatever that was going on and manifested that into a phobia. And then it just opened up a wormhole of other phobias. So like I remember, and then all of a sudden, like I'm on a plane and I'm just like, I'm like I'm convinced that I'm basically dying while I'm on a flight. Luckily, it was like a couple-hour flight, so,
I
um
wonder, I've had similar claustrophobic consternation because I've had a history of having to pee a lot, and that 20, 30 minutes when you're sitting there waiting for the plane to either take off or right after you land when you can't get up, I used to really freak out about that, so not to the extreme you're talking about, but I
yeah,
do, and then in my head, it's like, "Oh my gosh, you're gonna have to pee, and I don't have to." It's just like
right.
this worry.
Yeah, and there's like there's kind of a sick cycle that's going on because our, nervous system, our anxiety is tied to our gut. There's like this whole, like, gut brain science out there, and it's all completely related. It's like a sick cycle. It's like if you have a stomach ache, then you have anxiety because, like it contributes to your anxiety, and then vice versa. If you're already anxious, it starts affecting your gut. Like then you start having a stomach ache. So it's like you can't have. It's almost like you have to have one with the other whenever they come about. So yeah, so that's exactly what it is, man. I was on a flight and, like, just sitting there and, like, just that, that moment, it's, 30 minutes where you're just waiting for the plane to take off and you're sitting there and you're by the window and you can't get up, and I mean, if it's one of those things, like, at this point, one of the ways that I kinda, like, get through it, I'm like, "You know what? Fuck these people. If I have to get up, I'm getting up." You know what I mean? Like, what are you gonna do? Like, stop me from going to the bathroom? But yeah, so it was a really weird thing that happened. It's like it was a great learning experience in terms of, like, learning more about yourself psychologically, but I'll tell you this, man, it wasn't fun. It was, I ended up having to be prescribed, like, Xanax, and I was taking Xanax, like, pretty often, but I knew how bad benzos are, and my one of my biggest fears is getting addicted to it, so I chose alternative routes to try to mitigate the anxiety.
Do you think on any level the trauma you went through for those first 18 years maybe manifested as these
Oh, 100%, 100%. So part of it, one of the parts that I didn't talk about is the whole, like, me in a relationship thing. Being in love with somebody that you're not either you're not compatible with now or you're not compatible with in the long term, whatever the answer is, that I'll never know, which is fine, but I thought I my parents separated when I was 25, but for 25 years, it was the most tumultuous relationship that I've ever witnessed, ever. Like I said, alcoholic father would beat both my brother and I, would beat my mother, and then the thing is, there was no even questioning of separation or divorce, and so I was constantly seeing that, and then when the my breakup started nearing, part of the anxiety that I was having was I kept envisioning myself in that same relationship. It's like you fast forward 15 years and I am this overweight alcoholic father who is who the moment he comes home from work at 5 or 6 p.m. he cracks over his first beer, he's nearly blackout drunk by 7, and he's completely disconnected from his family, and his only connection is reprimanding his kids corporally, and then you have the depressed mother who's dealing with all of this too, and is just like trying to save the family through religion, but at the end of the day, it's like the only way to save us at the moment was basically leaving the alcoholic father, but wasn't happening because we didn't have any money because we were broke. My mom worked as a cleaning lady for many years, and then she did shoe shining, and then my dad was in construction. So there wasn't a lot of money coming in general. Plus, my parents used to take like 3 month long vacations. Not great with money, but internationally to Brazil, wild. But anyway, so it was that there was part of that too. Part of the anxiety was this the old trauma that came up. And then, and man, it's like the resentment then comes up too, right? And then you have this hardcore resentment because I'm not completely distant from my parents. I still interact with them. And even now at times we almost like we don't talk about it anymore. And so now there's this cordial relationship between my parents. And like I have no like I can go years without calling my dad, but my dad will call me. But my mom, we have a better relationship now. My mom started opening up a little bit more, and I think she cares way more about her kids than like than anything else. So she has become a better mom in our adulthood, but for my brother and I. Um, but so there was a lot of that, man. There was a lot of when I say everything came crashing down, Savannah, like everything came crashing down. Like from literally like my relationship, my health, my occupation, my things that I wanted to do outside of my occupation, my history with my family, like all in one summer, just a full mental breakdown just came. And then like I said, it's related to everything. So it's related to my past, my present, and then even my future. Like all of it just at once.
So, yo, I'm going to use what Emerson is saying right now as I look right directly at you here into camera one. Y'all, if trauma goes into you, it's not just going to dissipate, turn into fog or some strange mist and float away one damn day. This
Yeah.
shit has to come back out. Either it's going to come out through some sort of therapy. I've relived old trauma in my dreams and shit, and it felt like it was all happening again. That was it coming back out. There's a big thing that we deal with in hypnotherapy too, or even outside of hypnotherapy. You don't have to be in front of a hypnotherapist for that to happen. As a massage therapist, I saw it turn into physical ailments in people. It could get worse. It could be cancers and all kinds of shit. You have to be careful, when bad things happen to you or you do bad things to other people, not really processing and working through it. Resentment simply will not do. As they would tell me in Crystal Meth Anonymous, holding on to resentments and bitterness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Yeah.
When I read through my TikTok channel and different things like that, there's people who are like, I just can't let it go. I can't forgive them. They took so much from me. They're like, but baby, you stay angry, they continue to take more.
Mhm.
And so we got to get a grip on ourselves emotionally and come face to face with shit and not try to like cross our fingers and I don't know, click our heels 3 times and hope shit's just gonna get better. It's not. That shit's gonna catch up with you one day. You get turned into dementia later on down the road and all kinds of things, child. I have seen it.
Yeah.
Women, Imma tell y'all, when y'all got these trifling ass men, if there's any kind of way possible that you can leave, leave. I wish to God, Jesus, and the Holy Ghost that my mom would have left my dad after that we know of his second time going hoeing around. Okay. Okay. Women, admit that you have a codependency built up on these men and stop using your children as an excuse to stay. You not staying for the children, bitch. You staying for you
Yeah.
because you strung out and addicted on this motherfucking trifling no good dude. Some of y'all, you can't financially leave. That's different, but bitch, get a game plan because the longer you stay around that toxic ass motherfucking man, male, whatever the fuck you want to call him, he's hurting you more. He's hurting your children more. And all of this is revolving around some dude with some unresolved issues that can't come to the table like an adult and deal with life on life's terms. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
This okay, so this murdering of your friend. Now you did a great job illustrating how much you love your friends, you know, how tight knit that y'all are. I've observed that people who are not clear, you know, where they're at spiritually and things like that. I've observed that they tend to be very, very close with people in this physical realm because that's where they draw the most strength from. I'm not judging that or condemning it at all. I'm just using that to say that you probably for all that you said about how much you love your friends, it was probably grossly understated because coming from your history and everything, relationships are super important, and this is who you have access to,
Yeah.
you know. So so your friend got murdered. How old was he? What happened? Where did it happen?
Sure. So, and I do want to say really quickly before I get into it is you can't choose your family, but you can certainly choose your friends, and you can turn your friends into family.
Oh,
I
like, that was spoken like a true drag queen. Breathe. Chosen family. Hashtag chosen family.
exactly. So I I I'm unfortunate with the card that I was dealt with a lot of my family members, except my luckily I have the best brother in the world, and luckily he met his wife is incredible, and they have 2 beautiful children. That family that is the best part of my family by far. The only 4 people in my life, family-wise, that I would die for. And but I got so gotten really, really lucky where, man, over the years, the amount of friends that I've made in a variety of spaces, in college, I mean, from high school to college to traveling, I've got these pockets of friends really, I mean, practically all over the world, and I can call a lot of them best friends, and I can lean on them when I need to. I can call them whenever I want. They'll always be there for me. When this happened was probably the perfect representation of that. So, there's a chance I might get a little emotional, just an FYI, but so my friend read it's going back to the whole mental health thing. So he was stabbed to death in his garage or just outside of his garage, obviously at his home. He was by himself. His wife was at work. His kid was already at school or daycare. And and basically it was in Connecticut. He's from Brooklyn. They lived in Brooklyn, I think, or at least New York for 20 years. So this is where it's a little bit more shocking. The city that it happened in, or really not barely a city, it's a town, hasn't had a homicide in I think 12 years. And he was stabbed to death by his neighbor. Don't know why. It looks like a psychotic breakdown from a neighbor. Some of us think that it might be emotionally or racially motivated because so he's black, his wife is white. There's that. I don't know. but the guy definitely seems like he's, for lack of a better word, just off his rockers. No history of mental health, which is also very shocking, but yeah, apparently he said that he thought he had some delusions, which is why he did what he did. And yeah, so that happened, and going back to, like I said, showing how amazing my friends are, we,
Wait, 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 wait.
yeah,
So you're saying your friend was black, his wife was white. His white.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
The neighbor that stabbed him is white.
uh-uh.
Okay. So when you say the neighbor had some delusions, what the fuck does that mean? What did he used to see?
Well,
What did
when
he was
when
stabbed?
he was arrested, he said that he suspected my friend that he was trespassing, and he was specifically trespassing in his attic. That's what he said when he got arrested, so he said he acted in self-defense. So, that's, like, and the thing is, that's all we know. There's not anything else that it was said. He's been arrested, he's gone to court already, except I think his court date got pushed for another day. I'm not really sure. But yeah, it honestly, what makes it even worse is because I don't know, it's like, I mean, like, if someone dies in a car accident, it's awful, man. It's awful, it's really, really sad, but it's like, it's you can make sense of the death. You can make sense of the death, you can make sense of the fact that whatever, someone ran a stop sign or a red light, you know what I mean? It's like, it sucks, but when something like this happens and you have no answers, it just makes it much, much worse. And
How
so, yeah, I can't answer any other questions other than that.
how old was he?
30, I think he's 38 or 39. Yeah, yeah.
Gosh, I know that must have been so hard on the wife.
Right.
So how did you and your friends handle this? I think you were about to talk about that.
Yeah. Well, so the thing is, obviously, it was like it was it was one of the hard, like, it was we I mean, we didn't handle it well at first, obviously, because it's one of the worst news you could possibly it's the worst phone call you could get to an extent, right? It's like, because at the end of the day, like I said, we were all family. Like, this particular group of friends, like, you know, we're so spread out globally, but we when we come together, we can spend months without talking or seeing each other, sometimes even years. And and there's this weird, just like uncanny ability to stay in contact with each other. And no matter what, it's so when this all happened, everyone for the most part, everyone that could, it's like, I don't know, it's like a big group of us. It's like 18 of us, I think, something, maybe something like that. And everyone that could, because I have like one friend who's in Africa who like can't get a visa, but dropped everything, just dropped everything. Didn't worry about work, didn't worry about life at all. And we all flew to Connecticut. We were all there within a week. We were there less than a week. And it was just like, it was like really heartwarming, because I mean, you can't even like imagine what she's going through. They were together for almost 20 years, and they had this beautiful kid, 2 years old. And, you know, how do you even,
Now you know that man that killed him needs an ass whipping.
well, yeah, yeah,
That's some bullshit, right? That's some bullshit.
yeah,
So, yo, what is the warning here? I'm not saying I don't know the situation, but particularly if there were warning signs or not, I don't know. But what I'm hearing that needs to be spoken is that when we are close enough to somebody to see that they're not completely sane, especially in children, you can see this in parents if you're old enough to do anything about it. And certainly in your intimate relationships, let us stop trying to compromise with the way we see people kind of talking to themselves and shaking and shit or saying things that don't line up to what they're doing, because people who have undiagnosed and untreated mental health issues, it just gets worse as they get older. It's not like it just suddenly reverses.
Yeah.
And so if you have a chance to escape and get away, this poor man did not. So for those who do him some honor, if you dating a crazy motherfucker or you got a crazy ass child, say something, do something, and stop trying to explain this shit away. He didn't have a chance to do that, but you do. So that is our learning and take away. People, when they snap and break and they're like, I don't know what I did, I fucking believe them because they're fucking crazy and they don't fucking know what they did. And that's why the fuck they got to be locked up. Down here, like in New Orleans, in spiritual circles, cops talk to people and they tell us how they arrest people. And when they arrest them, like their eyes are rolling up in their heads and shit like that. And these people do not know that they're out there doing these crimes because of the way, they're under demonic possession and different things like that happen. I view people with fractured minds as easy conduits for the devil because they don't balance out. They don't know why they think what they think or why they do what they do. They just go out there and just do all kinds of shit without rhyme or reason. Just like we were saying earlier, or I was saying earlier, anything that feels emotionally intense enough is enough to convince weak minded people to just go and do it.
Yeah.
They don't care where the influence is coming from. Those cops will not go in court and say what they actually saw because they want to keep their fucking pensions and retirement.
Sure.
But out there on them streets, all kinds of things are being said and done by those police, baby. You heard me? I'm telling you right now what the truth is. I'm sorry you and your friends had to go through it. I am glad for what we're able to learn and take away from it.
Mm.
But 20 years, as hard as it is to find a good person, that woman she has some good class. I'd have been up at that jail, like, bring that motherfucker out here. He got me fucked up.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
I know, man. I really can't tell you. Like anger, there's no word to describe like the level of anger, that I'm sure she's having, but I'm just speaking anecdotally for me. Like I would, I have fantasies. I feel like I don't know. I don't know how much I should say, but it's like, but as much as I wanted something to happen to him, and really like if I could do it, but you know, it's yeah, it's
Oh,
it's different.
the guy who murdered your friend, did his wife had anything to say?
Oh, there was no. This is a guy, a 30-some-year-old who lived with his parents. Like this is not anybody who.
Girl, that's all you need to know right there. What the fuck? That that gives me the same vibes as when these parents go and buy their kid a fucking gun, then that kid goes and shoots up the school and shit like that. I'm all like I was saying, parents, if you got a 30-something-year-old child who marinating in your damn house, okay, not saying a person has to have something done by a certain age. I don't subscribe to that. I wish people would get that shit out of their head too. But clearly, this person was fucked up with nothing but extra time on their hands to get lost in thoughts in their head. Okay, not bouncing those thoughts off of anybody that's actually trying to help them. Parents were too nice. Parents not being too nice to your fucking children. Then in the book of Proverbs, it mentions something like if a mother doesn't actually discipline and restrain their son, that son will bring you to shame, you know, into ruin, and even onto ruin, bitch. You are not doing your kids any service by dealing with a slack hand with them, patting your fucking fist and fucking, rule them more strictly. We don't do people a service and we don't challenge them. That's not it. If you love somebody, you challenge them. If you hate somebody, just let them spiral off all willy-nilly. Complete opposite. And so I feel like more could have been done to prevent this. I don't know the parents, but that just sounds like it's out of balance. He was
Oh,
Knows because he wasn't seeing no fucking therapist. Or if he was lying to him.
Yeah, yeah, of course. It's funny. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, and you know, there's like parenting is hard, but it there's sometimes it doesn't have to be like some people make it harder on themselves. I I was thinking about this a while ago. It's like, well, it's the kind of in vein with the same conversation that I was having with a friend of mine, but it was, it's one of those things where there's a lot of people out there that, it's like they have kids and they have this blind faith that their kids are perfect. They're perfect little angels and they're never gonna do anything wrong. And then even when they do wrong, they kind of mask they put this mask over whatever the situation is. And so I've been preaching this so much. It's like, a lot of these times where when whatever shit any shit that happens, especially with these mass shootings, it's like you always want to go to the root cause. Some of it some people can be perfect parents and they just have some deranged kid. But man, I would, if you're asking me which if I'm going all in on one thing and it's completely binary, I'm gonna say that a majority of the time it's probably some sort of form of neglectful parenting or shitty or whatever it is. Like, it's you don't I don't know. Oh, you don't have to like I said. I know some things can be hard if you're a single parent. I can't even imagine how tough that is. Or if you're partnered up with somebody who's an alcoholic or whatever, I know that sometimes it can be tough, but at the same time, you know, you gotta put the for those 18 years, man, you gotta put the effort in. You really you've gotta take care of that life, and if you don't, there's repercussions like what's going on around the world, so
What happens is you've got broken people having broken children.
yeah.
It's really fucked up. So, like, if I want to go buy a child and adopt his ass, because he's already in a fucked up situation, I had to go through background checks and all this gauntlet. But if I have undiagnosed mental health issues, I can go fuck somebody, have sex with somebody. I really think the word fuck is arbitrary. I'm just trying to get away from it. Yeah, I can go and mate and copulate, okay, and have a child, and the government does not care about my state of mental well being. Okay. So what this means is you have a lot of people with broken minds having children, and you cannot give away what you don't have. Okay. So that parent who with undiagnosed and untreated and unresolved mental health issues is not going to be able to spot when their own child has mental health issues. But parenting is more than just having these cute little kittens running around. It's forever. And neglectful parenting to me is also not spotting when your kid is thrown the fuck off. You know, a lot of people could have been spared heartbreak, ruin, and death. If the parent would have just said, you know what, I hope for the best for my kid, but he's another little fucking Jeffrey Dahmer growing up under me. Can't have him out there cutting people up and chomping on them. Come to terms with how evil your fucking child is, bitch, and do something about it. You created that spawn of Satan. And you need, you need to go out there and do something with their fucking bitch ass.
Yeah. So it's funny. So I actually part of this conversation that I was having with somebody yesterday, this exact conversation. So like I uh, maybe I won't say exactly who it is, but anyways, I know someone and I was over at their family's house for Christmas several years ago. And and I remember I was, I'm probably 30 or 20, 28, 29, 30 years old, something like that. I don't remember the exact time frame, but I remember so it's this person and then his brother, and so we were at their parents' house for Christmas, and then I had other family members come in from other countries. I'm purposely trying to be vague depending how big of a reach this is, but but it was funny because so there was this weird moment where I'm hanging out in the bedroom with my friend, and we're just like, it was almost like we're in high school. He's like laying in the bed, I'm laying in the computer chair, we're watching UFC, we're just like hanging out, simply hanging out. And then his mom comes crashing through the door, and there's a bag of weed. And she's like, "Whose is this?" And and mind you, one of my family members that flew in has like a 5-year-old daughter, a 9-year-old daughter, and then a 12-year-old son. And then she's like, "Whose is this?" And I'm like, I'm like, "You're not." I know she's not thinking it's me. You know what I mean? Of course, she's addressing her son. So I kind of just sit back and let them handle the whole thing. And the guy's like, "No, it's not me." And she looks over at me, and she's like, "Is this yours?" And I'm like, "Are you joking? Are you actually asking me if this is mine?" And I was like, "How about your other son who works at like Amazon warehouse who has 2 Mustangs? Like, who do you think the weed dealer is?" And she was like, "Wait, what do you mean?" I was like, "My son really works hard." I was like, "2 Mustangs? And he's been working at an Amazon where he's at an Amazon warehouse making $12 an hour for 6 months? That'll." I was like, "I make 6 figures and I don't have a fucking Mustang." Like, it was insane. Like, I couldn't believe it. And so, like, that parenting mentality can be so fucking detrimental when you're just, because I'm telling you right now, man, if and when I have kids, and if they're living under my roofs, and next thing you know, they pull up in 2 Mustangs, and I'm like, "All right, hand over the finances. I have to check this out." I was like, "I know exactly what you make. I did your fucking taxes." And I was like, "There's no way." And I was like, "Listen, you're an adult. Want to be a drug dealer? You're more than welcome to. Outside my motherfucking, like, I don't care. I don't give a shit. Like, it doesn't bother. Like, as an adult, do whatever the fuck. I don't give a shit." But the thing is that, like, you're not gonna hide anything from me, and I'm not gonna be a parent that doesn't know shit. If you want to be a drug dealer, let's talk about it. Why you want to do it? Let's talk about consequences. You know what I mean? I would rather have an adult conversation with you, and but like, I'm like, listen, we're gonna talk about why pros and cons. How about that? Pros and cons. You know? But, like, I'm not gonna be a parent that's gonna be like, "Oh, no, my child's perfect, and yeah, he just works hard at Amazon, and even though he makes $12 an hour, like, he must save all his money and blah, blah, blah." You know what I mean? Like, it just feels like an idiotic approach to parenting. And honestly, quite frankly, I think it's lazy. It's fucking lazy. And I think that that's what's happening a lot of the time. So these people, they can just have children without any vetting, 'cause there's no vetting through the government. I'm not saying there should be vetting. But there's why is the we're maybe there should, but, like, there's vetting in the adoption process, and a rigorous vetting approach to adoption. But, like, it's like, but here there's millions of kids out there who need a viable home to grow up in, and they're like, "Well, we don't know. Oh, you got a DUI in 2011. Are you sure you're fit to be a parent?" I was like, "Oh, when I was 19?" Like, what an insane fucking concept, like, anyway, so it's there's no education. There's a ton of education for a bunch of things that are somewhat arbitrary, but there's no information readily available for people to be better parents or something, or some sort of, not policing. I don't know what the fuck to think about it, but anyways, it seems disingenuous as a society for us to just openly accept shitty parenting. I don't know.
This all amen and amen. And yes, it should all be screened and filtered, and you should have to submit fucking DNA samples before you just go stick a dick in a pussy and the kid pops out. Fuck all of that. Again, this is not to do with people who get raped and all that, completely different. I'm talking about people who intentionally, knowingly have children.
Yeah.
I always say this: people have kids for inherently selfish reasons. I know said God be fruitful and multiply and all of that. But, the earth is kind of populated. We're kind of good on that. you know, you always, the way people talk, they'll say, "Oh, we wanted to have kids. We wanted someone to love. We wanted this baby shower." People have kids for themselves, for their fucking entertainment, so that they have someone to love. They're a glorified pet. You're not doing that child a goddamn favor by bringing them into this world. And I'm not trying to sound jaded, but the world isn't exactly like a springy, rosy place to be. You know, you're having a kid, pulling them into this life so that you can pinch on their cute little rosy cheeks. That kid is absolutely functional for not a bitch ass thing for the first like 4 or 5 years of their existence. They can do nothing but consume. Okay. So I would say check your motives, and if the only thing that's coming out of your mouth is what you want to gain from having a child, understand how self centered that is. It has nothing to do with the child. I ain't having no biological kids. Like I said, I'm gonna go buy me one of them little motherfuckers. Probably the next 10 years. Probably would get this get the bastard shipped from Amazon, by that time. you know. Wouldn't that be great? Just order, can he be a 10-year-old and all that,
Yeah,
that
and yeah,
bastard
he'll get
love
me
it.
in 2 days. Yeah,
Right. Prime, they'll just maybe they'll just have him waiting at fucking Whole Foods at the locker. Some shit like that. I'm gonna go help some kid in some fucked up situation already here. I am not arrogant. I don't have hubris and pride. I don't need to see a little mini me running around. My family line will not be continuing through no physical DNA because my family line is fucked up. And this shit needs to like not continue. So yeah. So maybe we can go shopping for kids together. We can like go buy one. You can buy you one, you can buy me one, and then we can go to like Starbucks after some shit.
that's great. I've already. It's funny. I I did a little microdosing of acid and also got pretty drunk one night in New York, like back in December. And that's funny. Had this conversation with a friend of mine and one of my best friends, and don't even I barely remember this, but for whatever reason, I felt the need to let her know that I'm like, I love adoption. like I was like, I think that even if I have biological kids, like I'm still gonna adopt kids. Like I just feels like the right not it's like it's not just the right thing to do. It's um like if you I don't know, man, think about the world and how much better the world could be a better place if just there were other people out there just doing a tiny bit of a selfless act, right? And it's like if you're already willing to have children, sure, is there okay? Because one of the biggest arguments is like the whole like psychological gamble of adopting, right? And it's like, man, but the thing is, dude, my family already fucked up. You know what I mean? It's always gonna be a psychological gamble, always, you know what I mean? I I'm just kinda let's just be a good person to this child, and like I said, do what you need to do for 18 years, I feel like 80% of the time, you're probably this child would probably turn out alright, you know what I mean? Yeah, so
Your parenting will exceed 18 years. Parenting is forever. So
no,
that
I
it
get that. I'm just saying, in those 18 years, because after that, they're like, you're still parenting, but they're out loose, right? Now you're getting phone calls for advice and shit like that. They might stay around longer. It's more of an expression. But I'm just saying, as they you have this opportunity to not instill trauma in them for those 18 years,
okay, I
right?
can fuck with that. I
That's
can
what yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah. So
All right. So speaking of us becoming dads one day, this brings me to the dad joke section of the show. Y'all, we do this here after we like Emerson and I talked about all this deep shit from all of you fucked up parents out there doing what the hell you doing with your kids. And you need to learn, face your own issues, bitch. Stop sending all these evil devils spawn out into the world to fuck up good people. We talk about witchcraft. We talk about tattoos and how people think they're the devil as long with my evil pink beard. And we've given you some show titles from Emerson's show. He will be back in a few weeks to resume his show, but he has plenty of episodes for you to look up. In the meantime, we talked about how trauma goes into you, bitch. If you don't deal with it, it's gonna make your ass sick later. And we talked about how women need to leave these toxic ass men and stop lying and get over this codependency you have. Bitch, the dick ain't that good. Go find you another one. Go find you a vibrator. We don't leave one relationship to go cling ourselves to another fucking person. Stay by yourself, enter the void, and learn who you are before you get into another relationship. Today's dad jokes are brought to you by scarymommy.com. And the first one is, and I'm so happy that your cat popped in there. So this gives me confirmation that I'm right where I'm supposed to be because this first one is about cats. And I didn't know that Coconut was going to be joining us today. So thank the spirit for that revelation and connection. Emerson, what do you get when you cross a cat with a lemon tree?
cat with a lemon tree. I feel like, yeah, man.
Don't think too hard. I feel like you know this. I feel like you know this. These are always usually like right in your face. It's so right in your face.
Yeah, I don't know. I was like, you said lemon, she said lime. I was gonna say like meowgarita, but no, that I don't know. I don't know. I'll say I think way too far at the box.
A sourpuss.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. Nice.
Hey, Emerson, what did the tree do when the bank closed?
What did the tree do?
It went out of business. What did the tree do? What did the tree do when the bank closed and went out of business?
This man, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like these are all gonna be so obvious. What? Tell me.
It started its own branch.
Sorry. I knew it was gonna be obvious. I was like, I don't know. It's so funny because I was thinking like foreclosures. For some reason, I was thinking about like falling. Anyways, okay.
If you smoked you some weed or took an edible, you would have got this shit.
Um, for sure.
Hey, Emerson, last one. What type of tree fits into the fits in your hand? What type of tree can you hold in your hand? Say it again.
Palm tree?
Yes. Okay, you got one.
Nice. Hell yeah.
So, after all that everything I've been through, we can enjoy a good dad joke. This is how you know you don't take yourself too seriously, y'all. Laugh a lot, and I mean a lot. It's healing that you can't pay for.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put Emerson's link tree in the show notes. It's gonna have his wisdom link, TikTok. I'm gonna put his Instagram on there, and a couple of other things are in his link tree. Again, the show is Here's Some Evil. It will resume releasing episodes in a couple of weeks. So, is there anything you would like to say to close us out? You can have the last word and preach your gospel, boo.
Well, actually, you said one thing that was like really important that has helped me and my friends through a lot of the grief. So laughter. A lot of people take too many things a little too seriously, and even through trauma, you can still laugh. And I think the whole concept of something being too soon, I think it doesn't always hold true. If you can find funny in grief or trauma or something or whatever it may be, try to, don't force it, but be open to it. When I was going through this whole thing with my friend, I remember on the flight over there, I was trying to figure out like this is one of the worst things that could happen to somebody, right? And I was like, how the fuck can I help? How can I help? And 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 I literally was just writing things down. I'm like, I don't know, like, do I find another job and do I help like monetarily? Like, do I like like what do I need to do like to help my friend and friends? And I remember one of my friends, Megan, I confided in her, and she's like, listen, man, like you've always been a funny guy. Like I think you need to like don't show up and be like, oh my god, how are you doing? Like let's hug it out. Like be yourself and just fucking be funny. Just be funny. And there was a moment where it was like touching, dude. I took that home with me and I cried about it. Where my friend's wife, who's also my friend, she's just not my friend's wife. Like we all met them together. So just as much as he was a friend to me, she's a friend to me as well, and to all of us. And so she like turned to me and it's been a day and a half and we were just all ripping jokes and I'm just trying to, and I wasn't even, it got to a point where whatever funny gods, funny spirits that I embodied, but um I kept making people laugh and it was fantastic. And Alicia turned to me and she was like, where do you, kind of randomly, very genuine. She was like, where do you think your funny comes from? And I was like, damn, I was like, I don't know. I have no idea. I was like, I think part of it is trauma. I was trying to escape. And then she's like, well, honestly, like it's a gift. And it's really helped out. And man, I like knowing that, like to just like through laughter, to take away some of the pain, even if it was 1%, was such a rewarding thing. And it made me so happy that that there are ways that to help someone who's going through such pain. And it's really hard to show it, but man, like one of the ways it's the easiest and it's free is just, is through laughter. So I like to encourage more people out there to like, seek laughter in any way, shape, or form. Like, the world is cruel, man. Like, go to comedy shows, go see a funny movie, go read some funny literature. I don't know, to find something that like makes you laugh and smile. Like, yeah, I think you'll learn that you might even live a little longer. So, yeah.
In the in the Hebrew Bible, the book of Proverbs tells us that laughter is literally medicine. It's like medicine. That's what God says about laughter. So you and Jeebus are totally on the same page, Emerson. And now what the spirit is telling me to tell you is so I can see you with like a book. Okay, so in this book, okay, what you're gonna do is take in these jokes that you write, your original jokes, you're going to gift this to the world. Like, you're going to create this book, you will sell it, but books are gifts to the world because after we die, those books stay here and they inspire people. So in this book, you're going to infuse all the trauma and stuff and all the bad things that have happened, and you're going to mix your jokes in with them, and then you're going to present this like kind of like traumatic book mixed with jokes, and you're going to explain, how it helped you and different things like that and where the jokes came from. So it's kind of like a bittersweet thing that I think is going to be very original. So I would like to offer that insight to you, which just came to me, and I'm ready to buy it.
Cool. And yeah, I think I already have Here's Some Evil, inspired by Devanin. I'll You have my word. That'll be the title.
And so thank you so much for coming on the show. I look forward to releasing this, and you have yourself a wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I look forward to releasing this, and you have yourself a wonderful, soulful life.
Thank you so much, man. And once again, thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoy our conversations. It's our second conversation, and maybe we can have some part twos in the future.
Absolutely.
Awesome, man. Love it.
Thank you all so much for taking time to listen to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. It really means everything to me. Look, if you love the show, you can find more information and resources at sexdrugsandjesus.com or wherever you listen to your podcast. Feel free to reach out to me directly at